Your clothes should say a lot about you, but probably not in the way that you think. Nothing tells others more about you than the way you dress. You can derive that statement as a symptom of the superficial world, but that does not change the fact that it is true. Clothes protect us from the elements and prevent us from being arrested for public indecency. They are also meant as a means of expression. Your profession, your aspirations, your background, your self-image, all of this and more are expressed to others by your clothes. I'm going to go down just a little bit. It says an old money saying, it should take someone 5 minutes to realize that you're well dressed. Old money dresses in a generally low-key way because they have no need or desire to call attention to the fact that they have money, status, or privilege. And I've heard people say or argue against like, oh, it's not that people with money are not spending money on clothes. They're spending it in a way that is only reflective to their inner circle. So for instance, there's this talk about how it's flashy to wear like monograms and to be outwardly dressed in all of these different brands, like in a very obvious way. But there are people who have money that still dress very plain or simply, but the quality of their clothes and the brand of their clothes is worth a lot. And so apparently that's a thing too. So I want to point to that. Yeah, that may be a thing as well, but I want you to listen in for what he's actually referring to as far as dressing yourself. So he says, but that does not mean that they do not dress well. Quite the contrary. But there is a difference between dressing well and dressing fashionably. Everyone else buys the latest fashion advertised in magazines worn by supermodels or celebrities. Everyone else pays retail for those garments of generally questionable quality. Everyone else is seduced by bargains they see advertised. Generally, these goods are not of good quality and will be out of fashion next year. Everyone else's money will have been wasted, or at the very least, not often used as well as it could have been. Note, cheap clothing purchased by many people has a negative global impact. The working conditions and wages for people making a t-shirt that retails for $5 are always appalling. In fact, they're generally slave-like. And I know people will say, well, that's all that I can afford. But I also want you to consider that we today buy more clothes than ever before in history. I was reading something and it was saying how back in like the 40s, over the course of a year, the amount of clothes that a person would buy was 12 items of clothing on average. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but 12 items of clothing for the whole year. And so I realized, though, that really is a plausible thing to do if you're very intentional, because that's pretty much what I do with a low buy year. But I buy a little bit more than 12 items. But think about that. It's not even to say 12 items per year. You're buying less than the average person. And people who will argue that, oh, well, I'm just buying it because it's affordable, they're still buying heaps and heaps of clothing that if you took your time and took a step back a little bit and stopped focusing so much on filling up your closet so much as thinking about like what is practical and what's going to help me to get through what I want. And I know that people will say that's a very privileged thing to say, but it's actually not. It's something that we should consider. Like, how much of your clothes, and I talk about this a lot, how much of your clothes do you actually wear, and how much of it do you just buy, wear maybe once, wear maybe never, and then you end up getting rid of it? So although this might sound a little bit out of touch coming from the author, I think that it is something that we should carefully consider and actually think about, because if we were as hard up for money and as impoverished as we claim to be, and I'm saying we as people who make that argument, you would not have the masses of clothing that you have, and you would, in some regard, be focused on quality and more usability than you would be on quantity. And this goes back to the conversation that we had about how living in the world that we live in with the access to capitalism, constant consumerism, a person can actually be poor and be afforded the same luxuries or certain access to things that people with money would have. And that's just because everything is so accessible. So you can shop a whole lot. You would just end up getting more for the same amount of money that somebody might spend on one item. But arguably, if you have, let's say, $40 to go shopping, instead of trying to get as many pieces as you can and then end up having to 3 or 4 times a year do that again, $40 4 times a year, $40 3 times a year, as opposed to spending $40 at a time on quality pieces, you would be better off in the long term. And you don't have to throw everything away and start this process. This is something that you can actually do in levels. I think I'm going to do a series on that too. But anyway, old money, on the other hand, buys quality clothes, traditionally styled, and wears them for decades. And I think that's the big part about buying stuff that's in quality. The stuff that I have that I purchased like secondhand and that I was very intentional about, that was good quality. that was good quality garments, those things are still in good condition, and I'm probably going to have them for more and more years, right? But I find that obviously the stuff that you buy that's cheap, just on the fly, let me hurry up and get this so that I can use it, it wears out a lot easier, and then you end up having to replace it anyway. That was the first reason that I stopped buying stuff that people call like fast fashion. But even sometimes not fast fashion, but some of those trusted brands and stores that we go to, it's just high price polyester. So you just have to be very careful about that. There's a time and a place, and I think that if you need it, absolutely get it. But I also think that when we get older and we start to think more long term about things, and we start to, and you don't even have to be older to do this. I think the younger you are when you learn this, the better. Because if you can start to buy things that make sense and spend less of your money on the front end, then it just makes all the more sense. Like if you can have things in your wardrobe for like 5, 6, 7 years, even longer than that, and pass these things down, that would be ideal. So anyway, it says everyone else dresses up or barely gets dressed at all. Old money always looks presentable. Shirts, blouses, skirts, and pants are pressed, well made and well cared for. Shoes are worn, hair is combed and cleaned, certain benchmark is met, even in the most casual of settings. And that was something that he said later in this section. He said another thing is they always dress according to the occasion. And I think that that is also important. So sometimes when we have this, oh, I don't know what to wear, it's because we have like a different aesthetic or a different version of ourselves that we present depending on where we're going. And so none of our items can actually be translated across the board. Like in some regard, you would want, in an ideal situation, you would want for your wardrobe to be versatile in a way where you can dress things up and dress them down. Not everything in your closet is going to be a casual piece, and not everything is going to be like a super statement piece or a super formal piece, but you should have the ability to take your clothes and wear them in different ways, maintain simplicity, be able to go out casually, dress up a little bit more business casual. And I can't remember where that was in this section, but I do remember he mentioned that, and I thought that that was important too. So it says, if you dress like old money, no one will really notice how you dress. No one will know how much money you have or don't have. They will only assume that you have taste and discretion, not bad things to be known for. And then he says again, wink, nod. The biggest thing, I'm not going to read the attire for old money guy because I'm a woman, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know. Sometimes I don't know who's watching these videos, but I'm going to skip to talking about the women. So it says attire for old money gals. Women have historically placed more importance on their attire than men. Therefore, the simple and straightforward approach with which we dressed old money attire for men may be inadequate when we address the old money attire for women. OMG in this book just stands for old money guy or old money gals, whoever he's referring to. Now, this is why I said it's going to seem out of touch, because he's saying that they go to places like Brooks Brothers, Ralph Lauren. They purchase their Oxford cloth button-down shirts, wool and cotton sweaters, wool or khaki pants and skirts. It's out of touch, but in our day and age, it's not hard to find this type of stuff secondhand. And I told y'all before, when I go thrifting, my goal is always to get some quality fabrics. So like if I'm thrifting, I'm not looking to be like, oh, let me get a haul, let me see all that I can get. I'm actually aiming to see if I can find something that I like, and hopefully it's one of those things that one person brought a whole bunch. Like that happens a lot in a thrift store. You might go and you find one pair of pants, and you're like, oh, these are from this particular brand that I like. And then you find a whole bunch of other ones because it's like somebody just cleaned out their closet at the one time and brought the stuff to the thrift store. But I think that when you're thrifting, if you're going to take this approach to be more conservative with your spending on your clothes and you want the things to last, just be really careful. Look at the labels. Try to thrift for things that would otherwise be very expensive. Things like silk, things like wool. They're very expensive if you buy them brand new, or if you go to like Brooks Brothers or like J. Crew or Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren specifically, I always look for that stuff because I know, not necessarily for the labels or the design, but I always know that it's going to be stuff that will last because it's typically 100% linen, 100% cotton, 100% wool. It's usually really good fabric. So that's another one that I look out for. But he says they wear this style with complete confidence, contentment, and from cradle to the grave, never giving it a second thought. If you can dress this way and feel good about it, do so. You'll save money in the long run. In a world where so many chase after the latest trend to stand out from the crowd, ironically, you could be viewed as having a unique style. For me, unique is just, I try to stay away from trends, and I try to go with stuff that I know is not going to look out of standard for the times. So I try not to do trendy stuff, but I try to like stay pretty traditional and simple. And again, this is coming from the Old Money book, How to Live Better While Spending Less by Byron Tully.